financial literacy, and the human condition. Welcome to Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam.
Hi, it's Francis. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for watching this video. If you're catching us on YouTube, please help us help others by clicking like, subscribe, and all notifications so you don't miss any videos. And check back for the next video. I think you're going to love it. Thanks again. For more information, you can visit us at hugyourmoney.com.
Welcome to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler, along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam. Hi.
Hi, Jess. How are you?
I'm good. We had a couple little technical snafus, but I think we're better.
You know, we all have so much stuff in our lives. A lot of it is digital. Paring back is on a lot of people's minds, I think, and simplifying. And sometimes we're locked into it, like you and I are right now. We are, in a digital world. But for a lot of people who are thinking about simplifying their lives, they might be thinking about downsizing their home. And that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about downsizing, it comes in many forms. Obviously, you could just buy a smaller house, right? You could move to a smaller apartment. You could move to an in-law apartment if you're.
I'm dreaming of a granny pod, I got to tell you.
The granny pod.
Have you heard of the granny pods?
I have. Why don't you tell people your idea of the granny pod, though? Why you like a granny pod?
I like it because I just feel like, you'd be in somebody's backyard. So for me, it'd be like attached to somewhere where the kids were. They could come over. I could send them back to the main house. And then it's small, so it's easy to keep clean, and you don't have so much stuff in there. And I just think it would be cute as a button. But I will say, I just for fun, look at prices, and they're still expensive. It's still expensive.
What prices are you seeing for those kinds of things?
I mean, 200, 250 for like a small little under 600 square foot little granny pod.
Okay, so that's much more than the research I did, which says you can build, say, a tiny home or a container home anywhere. Now, this is a huge range, but anywhere between 20,000 and 150,000. And you're seeing prices even higher than that.
Well, because they don't include, when they're showing you that price, they're not including like the septic and the electric and
that's right.
That costs a lot of money.
Yes, and that's we were going to talk about that because so the main idea behind this is just what you said. It would be cute as a button and it would be easy to keep. And okay, if you're downsizing, why am I talking about it, right? Why is the Money Doctor talking about this? Because if you're downsizing to save money, you need to pay attention to the details that you just brought up. And I knew you would because I knew you were doing the research on the granny pod. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, maybe the most expensive part of, let's focus on tiny homes for a moment. The most expensive part of a tiny home or a container home, we'll talk about each of those, is maybe getting the land. Your land may cost you more, right? So there are zoning bylaws that just say things like you can't just park your camper in the back of someone's house and live in it, right? There are zoning.
But a lot of the local towns have just approved the ADUs, so that's a good step in the right direction.
It's true. And even tiny homes, Massachusetts only approved tiny homes with, what was it called? Appendix Q in 2020, right? It's only 5 years ago. So this stuff's coming into its own now, and you can build one that is, if you have the skills, you can save yourself between 30 and 50% of the cost of the unit by building it as a DIY thing. And there are kits out there, right, that you can build.
They sell them on Amazon.
They do sell them on Amazon as well.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yes, you can find them all over the place. In fact, you can buy some of these homes used now. Now, the thing you need to remember when you're talking about that, okay, I'm going to get a kit. My friends are going to do the work for me or whatever. All right. You need to be realistic about this. What will it really cost you? And you need to check out your zoning laws in your area because you will likely have to come up to code with things like electrical, plumbing, right? Maybe you can do this stuff on your own, but you may need a professional to do that, and they are not cheap. And they are not always readily available.
And not always getting stuff done on time either.
That's what was that? The movie The Money Pit. How long was everything going to take?
Right.
2 weeks. Everything takes 2 weeks. Okay. So you know what happens. A lot of contractors start many jobs at once. They get the money in the door, and then lo and behold, they don't show up for a little while. Not all contractors, obviously. So you really have to be careful about this. So if you're looking to downsize in order to save money, you really need to do your research and see what the overall cost will be, like you've been doing with the land, the plumbing, the electrical, the wastewater, right? These are all things that might
Yeah.
be that might have a higher cost for a tiny home or a container home than you might have in your regular home. You might need some special things like a water filtration system so that you
Hmm.
can take rainwater and turn it into drinkable or potable water, right? Um, Even your homeowner's insurance, you might need a specialized policy and it might be more expensive.
Right.
So you have to do your groundwork for this. Now, that being said, let's talk just a minute about tiny home versus container home.
Okay.
So a container home is built out of a metal container,
I
right?
know it's crazy.
Yeah, but they
They
make
make
some,
some of them really fancy and nice. Yeah.
they really do. And they can be welded. So they can stack one on top of another and things like that. So you can build quite a container home if your desire is that. Um, but you will also have to be aware of probably different insulation. Metal cools quickly. In our environment, you can live in these year round, but in our environment in Massachusetts, we're going to care about insulation to keep us warm in the winter. In California or someplace that's much warmer, they might care about insulation to keep them cooler in the
Right.
summer, right? But
Yeah.
insulation is insulation, and you'll have to have a special kind for the metal units. Um, if you go online and you look up tiny homes or
Hmm.
container homes, you will find amazing pictures, absolutely amazing images.
So beautiful.
I know we're on radio, but we also put this out as a podcast. I might try to fit some of those into here. It's just astounding how creative people are with these
Oh, I'll
things.
send you some of my favorites because I look at
Oh,
this stuff all the time. Yeah.
I would love that. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's put some of
Okay.
yours in for sure. So, some of the things that you might end up spending money on that you maybe don't think of when you're just thinking, hey, I'm going to downsize. It's 50 grand for that house and I can put it on my lot and I'm good to go, right?
Right. Yeah.
You might have to think about things like, oh, I don't know, your furniture. Will
Mm,
your furniture fit in a tiny home? And it's likely that you will opt for multi-purpose furniture, things with
right.
storage space inside of them, things
Hmm.
that do double duty. In your kitchen, one of the suggestions I read about, I think it was Better Homes and Garden, had a nice article about this too. And so did, I think it's tinyhomes.com.
Okay.
Tinyhomes.com like lists all the places, all the counties in Massachusetts that you can do these, and it points you to their bylaws. It's a great article.
Yeah.
Um, but Better Homes and Gardens gave a lot of tips, and we'll go into some of those tips, I think, in the second half especially. But, one of them was in your kitchen, maybe make use of things like floating shelves. Now, this
Mhm.
stuff will appeal to people in any home. I walked into my own kitchen and was like, "Hey, could I put some floating shelves up and
Yeah.
gain my counter space?"
The only thing just have to remind people you've got to keep it clean then.
Yeah, you have to keep it clean. So things like this will appeal to anybody. And in the kitchen, they were talking about maybe a rolling cart so that you
Mhm.
don't clutter up your floor space in a tiny home or a container home on a permanent basis. And you pull it out when you need it. And when you don't, it goes, somewhere else and becomes something else, right?
Right.
So maybe it becomes your TV cart and then it's
Mhm.
your kitchen cart or whatever. So you can get it to do double duty or a nightstand or whatever. So those kinds of things I think are really interesting and fascinating. And when you look at some of these images of tiny homes and container homes, you see these incredible loft spaces um,
Mhm.
because by definition, in order to be approved, at least in our state, it has to have a living space, a cooking space like kitchen, and a bedroom, right, and a bath.
Mhm.
Has to
Yeah.
have those areas, and they all come. This stuff is so complicated if you start to look at it. So just when I say zoning bylaws, just you have to look at Massachusetts, and then you have to look at your town or city, because although Massachusetts has approved these homes, tiny
Right.
home is under 400 feet, under 400 square feet, right? A tiny home is under 400 square feet. Your town or city also has its bylaws, and you will be expected to adhere
Follow
to them.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And in some towns and cities, you can't get it approved without the building inspector, right?
Mhm.
So this stuff's really got to pay, you've got to pay attention to it. But just to let people know, it is, as you said, really becoming more prevalent, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so in that list of places in Massachusetts, for instance, counties, um, Franklin County, where I live, is one of them that's approved it through the
Mhm.
Greenfield City Council.
Yep.
Berkshire County, north of us, approved. Um, Hampshire County, you're in Hampshire or Hamden County? You're in
Hampshire.
Hampshire County. I
Yep.
believe it's approved there, but yeah, I'm sure that it is. Northampton, in particular, has approved those kinds of things. And even most of the counties now, but even Nantucket, if you're thinking, well, this is something for a rural area or, higher dollar places might not do it, even though we have plenty of high dollar area. Nantucket did it with a zoning bylaw 139, and they
Mm,
actually will approve under 500 feet. So it may
got it.
be a tiny home in your mind, but not a tiny home to the state, may be acceptable by your town in certain
Mhm.
districts. So you got to look at all this stuff. And there are fees involved with, inspections and permits and things like that.
I feel like other countries have known about this a lot longer than us because I always hear about, I watch House Hunters all the time, the casitas for the mother-in-laws. And I'm like, that's basically a little tiny house, and I love it.
Yeah. They get these cute names like tiny house and casita and
Yeah.
granny pod, and that's really appealing to people, I think. It is, I should say, a little different than your RV, right?
Mm.
These homes can be lived in year round. They're designed
And there
to
are
be lived in year round.
there are some tiny homes though that have wheels on them, so you can move them that way.
Yes, and you have to, so that's one of the considerations for a tiny
Mhm.
home versus a container home, is that you might be looking for a mobile kind of a home, right? But you'll have
Right.
to check with your town to find out because a lot of the towns have said, yes, we'll approve these under 400 square foot homes if they're on a full foundation.
Oh,
That
yeah, and that's
means
more money.
another cost. That's
Yeah,
absolutely right.
there is all these hidden costs.
Yeah, so I think people get really excited initially about the idea of a tiny home, about decorating a tiny home. I have to tell you, I have a second property, and on that property, when I bought it, there was, and still is, a small space. It used to be an office,
Hmm.
and it was nothing special, and we turned it into a little tiny home, right?
Oh, I love that.
It
Yeah.
has a composting toilet, which was approved, right? It
Hmm.
has a self-contained sink.
Hmm.
Now, I would say this unit is not, we don't rent it or anything like that. It's just those things are creature comforts when we're in that space, right?
Right.
And it's in addition to the primary home. But it's not really designed for long-term living, but it has a nice deck and a view of water and, it's lovely. And every time somebody opens the door, myself included, I think I like it even better than the house, right? It's just
So
like,
cute. Yeah.
I open the door, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to be in here, right?
Yeah.
So, you have to think about those kinds of things and you could trim your costs by doing things like a compost toilet and you can also keep your footprint small and they're ecologically friendly, all of that. But you have to remember that it has to be maintained all the time. These are
Well,
things you're
this
going to
is
have
my
to,
idea, Francis. And you tell me if this is a good idea or not.
oh boy.
I thought that I was going to save on land costs because I'm just going to get the tiny home, put it on the back of a truck to move it, and just show up at my sister's, have them unload it, and then I figure it'll be more work to get rid of me than to just let me stay.
What's your
Right?
sister's number? Let's dial her up right now and ask her if it's a good idea. But you
Maybe get approval before you show up with a house.
But you bring up another point. Sometimes people want to use these for seasonal properties, and that
Hmm.
has its own rules. Temporary tiny homes and temporary cottages like this have their own rules, so you have to check with your town about that. But in the end, I think when people are looking to save money on these things, there are a few different genres that it appeals to, right? Sectors that it appeals to. It appeals to somebody looking to downsize. Maybe
Hmm.
they're looking to sell their home, get the equity out of their home. Yeah, they're tired of going up and down stairs. They want to be closer to their kids. They can do it on a lot right next door or part of their lot or whatever. And that's an area of people, a sector of people that like to do this. Another sector are people looking for second homes, like we just talked about. It's a temporary second home, and so it's less expensive. They don't have to worry about the major insulation if they're only going to be there seasonally and they're going to shut off all the water anyway.
Hmm. Yeah.
Their town might give them some breaks on things that they have to have for a seasonal property rather than a full-time property. And first-time home buyers, first
Okay.
timers. If we're talking about this, like, oh, it's under 400 square feet, like this is a major problem. There are a lot of people who live in apartments that are under 400 square
Right.
feet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's it. That's life, right? They don't have a basement. They don't have a lot of the things that other people have, an attic or things like that, but they make do
Mhm.
with that just fine. So the main thing I'm going to tell you in this half before we go to break, I guess, is just if you're thinking about this, I want you to consider renting a tiny home for a few months.
They're hard to find though to rent, right? I mean, I always
Yeah.
look online just to see, and they don't pop up that much. Used
They,
ones do, like for sale, like you were
that's
talking
right.
about buy,
But
but I
you
don't
might,
think that
yeah, but
much.
you might be able to make a deal with somebody who has one for sale to give them a little
Got it.
income renting it for a few months with the option to buy it.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So we can talk about that when we come back.
All right. In the meantime, let's get your phone number.
Sure, it's 413-773-3333.
And you can go to hugyourmoney.com. We'll be back with part two of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam on WHMP.
Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor is underwritten by Franklin County Technical School. We build futures. Visit fcts.us or call 413-863-9561.
Welcome back to Financial Fitness. I'm Jess Tyler along with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rayam, and we're talking about, well, I call them granny pods, but I guess they could be tiny houses or container houses, ADUs.
That's right. And, people other than grannies are buying them, right? So, and building them. And we were just talking about first-time home buyers. And I said, what I'd like people to do of all ages who are looking at this is to think about renting one for a
Mhm.
period of a few months and trying this on. What happens when you have 40 years of living in your home and all your children's pictures and all your creature comforts, all your tchotchkes are all hanging out there, and you
Is it
like to
Marie
have that
Kondo?
stuff.
You got to Marie Kondo everything. Yeah, it's hard. It's
Excuse
hard
me.
to get rid of stuff, especially when you have kids or um it's just like you said, that many years you collect stuff.
Yeah, Marie Kondo, actually, that's one of the things about decluttering. There are several ways to declutter, and
Yeah,
her idea is you only keep things that talk to your heart, that speak to
right.
your heart, and you get rid of everything else. But
Perfect.
a
I'm
lot,
getting rid of all my bills.
perfect.
Just talking about it.
Digitize,
Yeah.
digitize, right? No more paper storage. Yeah. So there are a lot of things like that. Another method is a four-box method. I'm going to keep this, I'm going to donate that, this is going to get trashed, that's going to
Right.
go into storage, right? And you put everything in one of those four boxes, and then you
Hmm.
sort it from there. So there are lots of tips about decluttering. But in talking about renting, you said, well, there aren't a lot available for rent. And while that's true, you could rent a space, an apartment on a month-to-month lease that might be of a similar size. Just see how it feels to live in a space that size.
Yeah.
Because, especially if you have more than one person or you have a pet, you're going to want everybody to have their own personal space, even the pet, I guess, right? A space
Yeah.
where the pet is comfortable and not on you all the time or whatever. Um, so you need to think about that. But one creative thing that I can tell you that most people don't think of is to rent with an option. And what that
Hmm.
means is you find somebody with one of these houses for sale that you think you might want to buy, and you have a conversation with them. Maybe you involve an attorney to help you through this or a coach, and you
Hmm.
say, I think I might want to buy this. And it's the middle of winter. I know it's not flying off the market or whatever the situation is. It's been on the market for a long time and it hasn't sold yet. I would like to propose that I rent it from you for 3 months,
Hmm.
and that I have the option at the end of 3 months to buy it for this dollar amount. And you agree on it right then and there, so nobody can change their minds and
Right.
get harmed in this. And then at the end of 3 months, if you exercise your option, then whatever guidelines are in the option take place. Like you're going to credit me 50% of my rent for the first 3 months toward the purchase price or whatever numbers you come up with.
Hmm.
And if you don't take the option, they've gotten 3 months rent and it's back
Right.
on the market for sale again, right?
Yeah. That's a really good idea.
And I mean, these contracts can be just about anything that two people can agree on. So that's
Hmm.
a way to try it on. The ones that you see for sale, I will tell you, sure, you can get a house that's for sale, but guess why they're for sale and they're only a couple of years old? Because they weren't the right fit for the person.
Hmm.
They didn't like it as much as they thought living in a granny pod, right? So,
Yeah, and you're right. Like if you maybe rent something that same size, because the thought of it is great. But even for me, like I'm like, oh, this would be great. But who knows? I might feel claustrophobic. I know for sure the lofts you were talking about, I would definitely want one with the height so you
yes.
could stand up. There's a lot of them that you have to kind of crawl up there.
Well,
And
there
I
are,
think that would be, especially as you get older, that'd be hard.
yeah, well, now that's an important point, and that's partly where the container homes, I think, are appealing to people because they can do it on one floor,
Right.
much longer, much larger space. Um, there are zoning bylaws in your town or city that will tell you, for instance, the ceiling height in the overall habitational areas. What's the word I'm looking for? Whatever.
Living
The
spaces.
ceiling, yeah, in the living
Yeah.
spaces. The ceiling height in the living spaces has to be no less than 6 foot 8 inches. But in a
Hmm.
loft, maybe it could be 6 foot 2 inches, or 6 foot 4. And so you have to look up your zoning bylaws to see what you have to do for that. Even things like stair treads and stair ceiling height as you're going up to that loft are governed. So you
Yeah.
need to think about those kinds of things. We talked a little bit about land costs. That it's not too much to say here. Other than that, the mortgage for these homes is not typically a traditional mortgage. You might have to
Okay.
get a different kind of mortgage or personal loan. So you should think about that. But when it involves, and talk to your bank about it, when it
Mhm.
involves a lot that you already own, a piece of
Right.
land that you already own, you may be able to use that land in order to get a construction loan or something of that nature to make your tiny home dream come true, right?
So that's
So
like collateral.
yeah, yeah, because I mean, there's something called an improved lot, which is
Okay.
worth more than a plain piece of land. An improved lot
Hmm.
usually has, a septic or connection to town water or sewer, something like that. But it might also have a foundation. If you're in a town where your tiny home has to be on a foundation, maybe you can afford to build the foundation and get your utilities connected, but you need a loan for the rest of the build. Well, you might be
Right.
able to borrow against your improved lot in order to do that.
Okay.
So, so talk to a lender about this, a mortgage broker. If you need help with that, you can always call us. We're not a lender, but we'll refer you to places that we trust. Um, we talked about your insurance being more. I do want to talk about some of the tips. Uh,
Okay.
so some of the tips that I thought were fun, and these will apply to all homes, not just tiny homes, and that's why I chose these particular ones. And these were from, I think, Better Homes and Gardens. Uh, Cleaning out your wardrobe. Oh my
Mm.
goodness, right? If you were going to move, now some people don't have a lot of clothes, and some people have a ton of clothes, and they switch them out from winter to spring to summer, seasonally, whatever. So this
Hmm.
was a tip I loved. Turn your hangers in the opposite direction. And
So you know whether they're,
when you get to the end of
yeah,
the season, the ones that are in the opposite direction you haven't worn. Was that
yeah,
a clever tip?
that really is.
I
Yeah.
thought that one was great. Install wall-mounted storage. So this is not just floating shelves, but anywhere, bookshelves, anything that you can get off of your floor and onto the
Hmm.
wall. If you think about this in terms of a tiny home, you'll even think about using ceiling space, right?
Hmm.
And things like the space above your cabinets to put.
Yeah.
I remember my brother built a house in Florida. He built this big house. It was a beautiful big house, but he had a problem with large platters. He entertained a lot, and he had these huge platters. And so when they built his kitchen cabinets in the kitchen, they made the ceiling a foot higher, and above
Hmm.
the kitchen cabinets was a rail, and he put all his platters up there, and they were all on display. He had to get a ladder to get to them, but they weren't
Right.
shipped up and in a cabinet. So think about using things like that or the insides of things, like even the insides of your cabinet doors. You have to be
Hmm.
careful when you put things on there that when you close, it doesn't, there is space to do that, it doesn't hit a shelf or something. But you can do a lot with decluttering, your house by using things like that.
And the tiny houses do show you good tips too. Like I always see hidden storage in the stairs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
In the stairs, in the floor sometimes, in the
Hmm.
ceiling sometimes, right? Under the loft. Things that do double duty, like the refrigerator is built in, but where it's built in, there's a thing above it that happens to be the television, right?
Hmm.
Which you wouldn't maybe do in a typical home, but in a tiny home, that's your living space. You're going to get up and cook something. You're going to pull the refrigerator open. You're going to sit down. You're going to eat it and watch it on TV, right? All in that one, all in that one area.
All in one.
Think about things like your furniture. We talked about multi-purpose furniture,
Yeah.
but when you're thinking about a tiny home or a container home, you also want to start thinking about slimmer furniture. In other
Mm.
words, think about what's important to you. The place that you sit is important to you, but do you really need
Right.
big, bulky arms on your chair?
Hmm.
We had this whole phase where everybody went to overstuffed furniture, oversized
Yeah.
furniture. That is not going to work in a tiny home. You got to
Hmm.
find slim stuff. Think more modern, more sleek, less space taking. So think about things like that. Um, the one of the things about tiny homes that we used in this other property I was talking about as well is mirrors. and shiny objects. So I'm not talking about like aluminum foil everywhere, right? But you can take you can hang a mirror anywhere, and it will help you bring
Looks like a more
more light
space.
in. Yeah, it looks like more
Yeah.
space. It brings light in, but you can even just lean one against a wall, on
Hmm.
top of a bureau or something like that, a big mirror, and make a statement with it. But also shiny surfaces. Like if you think about a glass coffee table instead of a hardwood coffee table, that
Hmm.
allows you, it looks like the objects are floating. It allows you to see the carpet underneath it or the floor underneath it. It's less noticeable as a big clunky object. It
Right.
feels like it opens a space. Or anything that is reflective, silver appliances or anything that's reflective will help bring the light in and will help to make the space feel a little more open. But decluttering is the absolute number one thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, this is just a fun topic, and I hope that if there are people listening to this that are considering it, that what they heard me say is watch your dollars,
Hmm.
research, right?
The
Make,
other, go ahead.
no, you.
The other good thing that I forgot to mention earlier that it's really good for is there's a lot of people that have parents now that don't want to give up their home, but they don't want to go into an assisted living facility, but they need help. If
Yeah.
you've got this in your backyard, they still have their independence, but you've got somebody right there, and it just seems like the best of both worlds. You don't, they don't feel like they're living with you, or you got to deal with like the son-in-law or daughter-in-law and whatever the noise with the kids, but somebody's there if they need something.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know how the trend started, but in Northampton, Mass, you have a wonderful facility that is an assisted living facility, and they have independent living cottages. They get the socialization if they want to go to the main building and
Hmm.
attend classes or bingo or music or whatever. And they also have help if they need it.
They're wonderful, but they can get super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what those cost per month, how many months you're going to pay for that, that's, I think, where people are starting to say, but I could own this. And again, it's not just for people downsizing. First-time home buyers, people who are
Hmm.
looking to keep a small footprint and live a simple lifestyle, people who don't have a lot of clutter to begin with are like, boy, I could live in a tiny home. It's my own
Yeah.
space. I don't have a landlord. I could do that.
I've seen people too on some of those shows that I watch all the time where they put that in the back, they moved into that and rented out the big house, got their mortgage paid for way quicker than they would have.
You brought up a very important point when you said rent. Um, a lot of towns will allow these tiny homes, but they have to be occupied by the owner and not rented
Mm.
out. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I'll just build a bunch of those and rent them out, you better
Right.
check with your town first.
Yeah.
However, something like we were talking about where you're renting to own,
Hmm.
uh, you could check with the town, but that is probably going to be allowed if you're doing it as part of a real estate contract.
Right. It's not like an
Something,
Airbnb kind of thing.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
different than that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, this was so fun. I have been looking at these and I will send you some pictures because I have some that are just beautiful,
yeah.
which are not under 100,000. But yeah, I'd love to share the pictures.
I just love the ideas. It doesn't matter what the cost of the home is that you're looking
Yeah.
at. There are so many creative ideas, and a lot of them are really about saving money as well as
Mhm.
space. And
Yeah.
so I hope this was a useful and fun show for people. Yeah.
Super fun. Let's get your phone number.
Sure, it's 413-773-3333.
And you can also visit hugyourmoney.com. We'll be back next week with another edition of Financial Fitness with the Money Doctor, Dr. Francis Rand. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.